This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore. Hey, stick around for this one. This is a good one. I'm getting ready to cut to an interview with Donald Sherman, who is the Executive Vice President and the Chief Counsel for CREW, which is a nonpartisan ethics watchdog, CREW, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. I've talked about them numerous times. They do amazing work, and this person has expertise in this matter related to the arguments that are going to be before the Supreme Court on Thursday about keeping Donald Trump off the ballot, prohibiting him from being on the ballot based on his participation in the insurrection. I want to read this particular section of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment before I cut to my conversation with Donald Sherman. And I'm going to cut out all of the extraneous other representative languages. You'll see where it's highlighted. But this is what it says. No person shall hold any office under the United States who, having previously taken an oath as an officer of the United States to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. We know, because we witnessed with our eyes what Donald Trump took part in. He not only incited a violent insurrection against the United States in an effort to stop a free and fair election, he also has given aid and comfort to those insurrectionists since. He doesn't deserve to be on the ballot. He is indeed disqualified based on the same Constitution that Republicans love to wave around. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Donald Sherman from the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. Donald Sherman, Executive Vice President and Chief Counsel for CREW. Thank you for joining us. I mean me, appreciate you coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
I wish I had such a lofty title as executive anything or chief anything. Alas, I am just a YouTube dum-dum. So
it's a lot of words. That's all it is.
With oral arguments set to begin on, I believe, Thursday for this case involving Donald Trump's disqualification from the ballot and his participation, his giving aid and comfort to insurrectionists. I want to dispel a couple of talking points out there that I hear from Republicans and people who defend Donald Trump, and that is that, you can't really call this an insurrection. It hasn't legally been defined as an insurrection. That's all just flourish in words. That it's not legally an insurrection. Can you once and for all dispel that for the audience?
Absolutely. Well, first, I would say that Republicans had no problem referring to January 6th as an insurrection in the aftermath of January 6th, including Senator Romney, including Mitch McConnell, including Trump's own impeachment lawyers. But also, as a matter of law, every fact finder that has reached this question have found that January 6th was an insurrection under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. So we brought a case in New Mexico in 2022 against a county official who participated in the January 6th insurrection, and that court found that January 6th was an insurrection against the Constitution, consistent with Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. The Colorado trial court found that reached that conclusion. That was affirmed by the Colorado Supreme Court, and in Maine, Secretary Bellows reached the same conclusion. So there is unanimity among every body, every fact-finding body that has reached that question, that January 6th was an insurrection, consistent with the definition and the historical understanding from the Reconstruction era.
I'm glad that you're bringing up the Reconstruction Era, which is the nexus of this particular amendment of the Constitution, Section 3 specifically. I talked about this about a month ago in a video about the arguments made by Senator Jacob Howard from Michigan, who led the Republicans in debate. that the early drafts of this particular language had the word "the" about the insurrection, meaning the Civil War and the rebellion. And it was subsequently removed to now the final version in the United States Constitution says an insurrection, a rebellion, not the. And I think that's another argument that's being used a lot, is that this only was for that time, that this isn't for today. These particular provisions in Section 3 of of Amendment 14 were for just Civil War era. Is my read on that correct?
So I think a lot of the arguments that we've seen just aren't historically accurate or very serious. And so we had a couple of briefs submitted in support of our clients, including from Pulitzer Prize winning historians like Jill Lepore, and then the preeminent historian of the Civil War, James McPherson, that looked at the history from the Civil War and from Reconstruction, and specifically noted that there was, as you said, a conscious choice made to ensure that Section 3 didn't just refer back to the insurrection that was the Civil War, but was forward-looking and covered future insurrections as well.
Yeah. So we've covered that it is, in fact, in the eyes of the law, an insurrection. We've covered that Donald Trump, we all we watched him participate in the insurrection, give aid and support, inciting the violence. We know the history of the writing of the particular verbiage in Section 3. What about the argument that people want to bring up a lot, that Donald Trump himself would have to be convicted by a court of law of insurrection before then being forbidden from being on the ballot for this particular insurrection clause?
Again, that's not consistent with the history or really the purpose of Section 3, right? No prior person who was disqualified under Section 3 was convicted of the crime of insurrection. There's no need for a criminal conviction at all. It's important to remember this is a qualification for office. Donald Trump's life and liberty are not at stake. This is just whether he gets to be on a ballot or not. If he were someone other than a former president, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. Donald Trump wants and has argued and continues to argue that somehow he is special and that the law shouldn't apply to him because he happens to be a former president, because he is popular within his party. And if we are going to be a constitutional democracy, which I'm told that we are, the Constitution has to abide whether you are a nobody with no shot of winning the presidency, or if you are a popular candidate who is one party's frontrunner for president. The Constitution has to apply in both scenarios. I mean, it's noteworthy that King Charles is in the news today. We chose not to have a king. And, Donald Trump's arguments suggest that he and he alone are above the law, as if we were a monarchy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I often hear the argument, and I see it in YouTube comments, being the chief YouTube dum-dum here on the channel, people talking about that this is stripping away Donald Trump of due process, that this is antidemocratic, that this is a partisan witch hunt or whatever. I mean, it seems to me that if this is partisan, then the Constitution itself and the language that was written and ratified by everyone involved in that process is also partisan. You work for an organization that is not a partisan organization. You take on ethics violations and corruption of people from both parties. Can you speak to that? The lack of partisanship in this endeavor?
Certainly. So as you said, CREW is a nonpartisan organization. We have former Democratic and former Republican office holders on our board. One of our recent former board members co-founded the Heritage Foundation, Mickey Edwards, and he also signed an amicus brief in support of our clients. Our clients are 4 Republican and 2 independent voters in Colorado, including Norma Anderson, who is 91 years old and is the former majority leader of the Colorado State House and Colorado State Senate. As she likes to say, she has been a Republican longer than I and most of her lawyers have been alive. I'd also just point out that we've had a number of former Republican office holders, including Governors Bill Weld, Mark Rasko, and Christy Todd Whitman, file an amicus brief. Former federal judge J. Michael Ludig, who was in contention to be on the Supreme Court under President Reagan and President H.W. Bush, as well as former Republican executive branch office holders like Donald Ayer, as well as at least a dozen former Republican members of Congress. This litigation is not partisan. As one of our amici said, this is about patriotism, not about partisanship.
Yeah, I also believe, thank you for that, but I also believe that this is about democracy. One of the most troubling elements of this entire saga, this episode in American history, is Donald Trump using democracy to end democracy. And I think that is a very troubling, real threat that we face right now. What would you say to those people who say that this is an anti-democratic move to try to prohibit Donald Trump from participation in democracy?
Well, I'd say a few things. One, the Constitution is the foundation of our democracy. In fact, I find it particularly rich for Donald Trump, who only became president because of the Constitution, despite him losing the popular vote, to now argue that enforcing the Constitution against him is anti-democratic. Right? Donald Trump was perfectly fine with the Constitution giving him the presidency, but now has a problem with the Constitution because it stands in his way. I would also note that this insurrection in particular was an attempt by Donald Trump to invalidate the 81 million Americans who voted for his opponent. And the idea that enforcing the Constitution against Donald Trump because of that conduct somehow being anti-democratic is laughable. The final thing I would say is the Constitution has qualifications for office, just in the same way that that Zendaya, who's not old enough, can't run for president, or Arnold Schwarzenegger can't be president because he's not a natural-born citizen, or President Obama, who may be popular in some circles, can't be president again because of the 22nd Amendment. The 14th Amendment bars Donald Trump from being president again. That's how our democracy works. If we're going to have a constitution, it has to apply whether somebody is popular, whether somebody is unpopular, whether somebody is powerful, or somebody is just a regular Joe.
Yeah. How are you feeling going into Thursday?
I feel confident that we are going to present to this court the strongest arguments in favor of Donald Trump's disqualification that can be made. I'm also quite confident that the arguments that on the facts and the law, we are correct. As I stated, the only fact finders that have reached the question of whether January 6th was an insurrection under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment found that it was. The only fact finders that reached the question of whether Donald Trump engaged in that insurrection found that he did. There isn't, there isn't disagreement about this. I mean, there have been numerous courts who, in other cases, have also cited Donald Trump for, as the cause of the January 6th insurrection. There was bipartisan support in the House and the Senate citing Donald Trump as inciting the insurrection. This is not especially complicated, at least factually. As you said, we all saw it. So I am confident that we are going to make the best case that can be made, and we are prepared to live with the result that the Supreme Court renders. I think a better question is whether Donald Trump is prepared to live with the results.
Oh, well, I definitely want to be asking the better question. Donald Sherman, is Donald Trump prepared to live with the results?
I think all we have to do is look at how we got here to get an answer to that question.
Yeah.
Part of how we got here is because Donald Trump refused to accept that all legal avenues to holding the presidency were foreclosed when
Sure.
when the Supreme Court declined to hear Texas versus Pennsylvania. But instead of abiding by the Supreme Court's and numerous cases rulings against him, he decided to take extra legal measures and to recruit a mob to come to Washington and through violence and force and intimidation prevent Congress from fulfilling its constitutional duty of certifying the election for his opponent. So we know that, so I have a high degree of confidence that if we prevail, that Donald Trump won't abide by the results of the highest court because he already had an opportunity to do that in 2020 and refused to do so, and instead resorted to violence.
Yeah. Well, listen, we very much appreciate your time. One final kind of unrelated question. I've long sung the praises of, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, your organization that you are a leader in. And again, this is far afield, but how does it feel to do work that really does contribute to the betterment of our country and the preserving of democracy? Not everybody can say that they have a job that really is that important. What the hell does it feel like to do such good stuff?
So I spent a long time working for Elijah Cummings, who was the chairman of the Oversight Committee for a period of time. And back in 2019, he had Michael Cohen before his committee. And this was after I finished working with him, but, still followed his work. And one of the things he said there, and context is important now, is, when we're dancing with the angels, the question will be asked, what did we do to keep our democracy intact? And he didn't make it to the end of 2019. And I think he was very cognizant in that moment of his own mortality. Mm-hmm. And his words stick with me every day, right? Yeah. When we get to, the end of our lives, or maybe when we get to the end of the day, right? We want to ask ourselves, what did we do to make this world a better place? What did we do to keep our democracy intact? His words are a constant guidepost for me. And I will say, I don't have to worry about that question because, I have the privilege of doing that work every day at Crew. And so, I feel good about that. And, it's unfortunate that we are in this moment where so many regular people have to stand up to vindicate the Constitution because Donald Trump refuses to abide by it. But I'm happy to count myself among, one of those regular people that get an opportunity to do that. I'm proud to represent Norma Anderson and our 5 other clients who, have stood up for the Constitution. It's the honor of my life to do that work.
I think we all stand upon the shoulders of giants. Some of the giants we stand on their shoulders are more giant than others. So it's Elijah Cummings is a big one. That's fantastic. Well, listen, I don't want to take too much of your time. I appreciate your answers, your candidness, your expertise in this matter, and I think that I speak for the audience when I say that we hope we get a good outcome from this Supreme Court on this very important matter about preserving our democracy. Donald Sherman, thank you.
Thank you.